Well, hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this online message. Hope everything is well with you. When it comes to announcements, kind of a quiet week. Wednesday night is Prayer House. We do have a deep dive class coming. Watch the mail. Deep dive coming up on a Sunday night, March 24th, and then Saturday morning, March 30th. Our topic this month is there a difference between the baptism of the Holy Spirit and the filling of the Holy Spirit? So that's an intriguing question. So hope you could join us. Keep an eye out for the postcard that should be in the mail. All right. Did you know that there is over 500 different named phobias? People's fears. Now, people have fears, obviously. So let me list off the top 10 phobias. Number one, you might have guessed, is arachnophobia. That's the fear of spiders. Ophidiophobia, I'm not going to pronounce these right. Ophidiophobia, that's the fear of snakes. That might be mine. I really don't like snakes. Acrophobia is the fear of heights. Aerophobia is the fear of flying. Cynophobia is the fear of dogs. Astrophobia is the fear of thunder and lightning. Trypanophobia is the fear of injections or getting shots. Social phobia is just social anxiety. Agoraphobia is the situation that's difficult of escape. So you're afraid of a situation like that. Mysophobia is the fear of germs. I was surprised that these two didn't make the top 10. Claustrophobia, fear of small spaces, and glossophobia is the fear of public speaking. So those are very real fears that a lot of people have. The snake one, probably the closest one for me. Now, there's a lot of not so serious fears, and I'm not going to pronounce these accurate, I don't think. Nomophobia is the fear of being without your mobile phone. Omphalophobia is the fear of belly buttons. Ergophobia is the fear of work. You might know people like that. Isotopiaphobia is the fear of mirrors. Phobophobia is the fear of phobias. Globophobia is the fear of balloons. Pogonophobia is the fear of beards. Decidiophobia, can you guess that one? The fear of decisions. Denepnophobia is the fear of dining with other people. And this last one I can't say. Arachnophobia is the fear, legitimate, I don't know how legitimate, but this is what it says. The fear of peanut butter sticking to the roof of your mouth. Now, some of these might seem serious and some of these might seem kind of silly, but the truth is, there are a lot of people that are fearful. There's a lot of people that have anxiety. In fact, I am in the personal opinion that COVID revealed anxieties that people already had. Interesting conversation, fascinating conversation. Anyways, we don't have time to get into it, but people were fearful. People were anxious before COVID came. Now, COVID came and it gave them something to attach that free-floating, unattached anxiety to, which only made the situation all the worse. But people are anxious. But this is nothing new. When you look at how our kids are being medicated and how culture and society is churning out just a lot of people on too many meds. Anyways, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear out there. This is nothing new. Jesus told us in Luke 21, there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehensive of what is coming on the world. Apprehensive, another synonym for that is anxious, okay? And there are people, even unchurched people, kind of sense there's something going on. There's something in the air. A lot of people are wondering what is going on because there's so much upheaval in culture and society. A friend of ours was on vacation and struck up a conversation with somebody at the beach, and they asked this question: do you think there's a coming judgment? And this was somebody who seemingly doesn't go to church, not involved in church at all. So there is this sense that there might be something going on. There is an apprehensiveness. Again, I go into statistics of how many people are walking around with some sort of anxiety or fear. Now, the good news is that there is a solution. There is an antidote to all this anxiety and fear. It's the fear that eliminates all other fears. As you might be able to guess, if we're talking about the awe of God and having a healthy fear of the Lord, you can kind of see where this is going. Isaiah 8:12-14 says this: don't call everything a conspiracy like they do, and don't live in dread of what frightens them. Make the Lord of heaven's armies holy in your life. He is the one you should fear. He is the one who should make you tremble. He will keep you safe. Holy fear eliminates all other fears and anxieties because it's backed by God's promise of being kept safe. I want you to think of your fears, think about the things that make you anxious. How is a lack of trust really the underlying cause of your fear or your anxiety? So think about it, whatever it is, health issues, financial issues, kid issues, whatever it is. How is your lack of trust underneath all that kind of propelling and propping up that fear? Psalm 31 says this: how great is the goodness you have stored up for those who fear you. You lavish it on those who come to you for protection, blessing them before the watching world. You hide them in the shelter of your presence, safe from those who conspire against them. You shelter them in your presence. I think one thing I've realized over the last few years is that humans are hardwired with a need to trust something or trust someone. We see it in little kids, but it's true for adults as well. We are hardwired to trust in someone or something. Now, if I could oversimplify things, today's culture, people are either putting their faith in God, like hopefully followers of Jesus do, but if that's not part of your equation, you're going to put your faith in people. All right? It's God or people. Now, unfortunately, maybe the people part is better seen, reframed as government. People are putting their faith in the government instead of God, because they're hardwired to rely and trust on something or someone. But this verse in Psalms, the promise of lavish goodness, safe in the shelter of God's presence, safe from the things that harm us, is not made to everyone. It's only made to those who fear the Lord. So when we fear the Lord, when we live our lives in a constructive, healthy fear, we're going to experience His presence. His presence is going to shelter us from everything else. He will keep us safe, like Isaiah 8 said. Now, you might think, well, is there any exception whatsoever? And I think you could say this: God permits someone who fears Him to go through suffering, yes, when it's purposed for God's glory. But even in these situations, there is a confidence from holy fear that can help eliminate our human fear. So I want to think about the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, okay? You might know the story. They refused to worship King Nebuchadnezzar, and they were thrown into a furnace for it. And before they're thrown in, they say, God can, He can, and even if He doesn't, we're not going to bow our knee to any human, to the king. We're not going to treat this king as a god. God can save us, but even if he doesn't, okay? So they were they fearful about going into the furnace? In some measure they had to be, but their fear of the Lord, their desire to please him, overrode their fear of death and fear of the furnace. So here's when you think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their names are still known and familiar by many. And why is that? It's because they left a legacy. They left an impression. Now, when we think of the word legacy, you think about people that are achievers. Steve Jobs accomplished a lot. He has a legacy. Elon Musk still makes a serious impression on people, still has a legacy. Teddy Roosevelt had a legacy. Jackie Robinson had a legacy. People who achieved great things, heroes. George Washington had a legacy. I'd say Neil Armstrong, the early astronauts all had legacies. I think you can even mention Dick Winters. There's a bridge named after him just about a half a mile from where I'm standing right now. A World War II hero, he had a legacy. Sometimes villains have a legacy. When you think about Benedict Arnold, what do you think? He certainly has a legacy. I would venture to say that the word Adolf is a name that's kind of tainted forever, okay? Same with the name Jezebel, okay? So sometimes, villains can have legacies as well. But here's the thing we need to think of different. Not just achievers, not just heroes, and not just villains. Everybody has a legacy. We all leave an impression. I want you to think about your grandparents, okay? Now, my grandparents have passed away. Most of us, if you're watching this, I'm assuming your grandparents have passed on. What kind of impression did they leave? When you think about your grandparents, what do you think of? That, in some measure, is their legacy, okay? We all have a legacy. I think about my friends in high school, my friends in college. I was a youth pastor in Michigan, in Texas, and in Illinois. We lived in Indiana. I served at another church not that far from here. And all these people, high school, college, the different places that I've lived, when they hear the name Matt Given, what do they think of? What kind of impression have I left on people? You know, I have left a legacy. Now, it's obviously not in a big achiever legacy. It's not a hero legacy. I hope it's not a villain legacy. But we all leave a legacy. So here's the question. How does a fear of the Lord affect our posterity? How does a fear of the Lord affect the way the next and succeeding generations are going to think about you and your reputation? I'm not just thinking about your friends, your coworkers. I'm thinking about your family. Now, when you're in your 20s, you don't think about stuff like this, obviously. But as you get older, when you start to turn the ripe old age of 57, you start to think, what are my kids, what do they think of me? What are they going to remember me for? What are other people going to remember me for? So this is a fascinating question. How does a fear of the Lord affect your legacy, or what other people are going to think about you? Well, we have some passages. Genesis 22:17. I will surely bless you and make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. Your descendants will take possession of the cities of their enemies. Now, it's true. You're not Abraham. No Messiah is going to come from your line of relatives. But this line here at the end, take possession of the cities of your enemies. I can't help but think there's still a sense of victory in that, okay? So God will bless us and our descendants, and I think it's fair to say, maybe a little bit of an assumption, that this sense of living in victory. Psalm 112, 1 through 2. Blessed are those who fear the Lord, who find great delight in his commands. Their children will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Luke 1:50. His mercy extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. That's pretty straightforward. His mercy, God's mercy, extends to those who fear him from generation to generation. It is a sobering thought to think that our behavior influences those who will follow us in our family. Now, we can have a conversation about generational sins and generational curses, but it's just a sobering thought to think that what we do sets a pattern. And if we're living with a fear of the Lord, it's a good and positive pattern. Now, I shared 3 names from the Old Testament: Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I have 2 American names to share with you. One you might recognize, one you won't. In 1874, a sociologist visited 13 jails in upstate New York. So this goes back a ways, okay? 1874, a sociologist was, for whatever reason, doing a study. He visited 13 jails in upstate New York. He found out that there were 6 people that were all blood related to a gentleman named Max Dukes. They were all related. They have 4 different last names, but he found out that they were all related. So just an odd statistic that 6 of these people had the same relative. So this sociologist decided to do a little bit of digging to find out about Max Dukes and his descendants. He found out of the 540 descendants that he could find of Max Dukes, 76 of them were convicted criminals. 18 of them were brothel keepers. 120 of them were prostitutes. 200 of them lived on government aid, or they were dependent on the government for their income or sustenance. Okay? Again, we could talk about generational curses and sins, but Max Duke's behavior set a pattern, seemingly, that led to a lot of destruction for the people that followed him. Now, at the same time, Max Dukes was born between 1720 and 1740. About the same time, Jonathan Edwards was alive, and he was married to a lady named Sarah. They were intentional about raising their kids in the Lord. They were intentional in their pursuit of God. In fact, they had 11 kids. So with 11 kids, somebody did some research, and out of the 1,394 descendants of Jonathan Edwards, they found out that 13 of them were college or university presidents. 65 of them were college or university professors. 3 of them were U.S. senators. 30 of them became judges. 100 of them became lawyers. 60 of them became physicians. 75 of them were Army or Navy officers. 100 of them either became ministers or missionaries, and around 60 of them became prominent authors. Jonathan Edwards set a positive pattern. He lived with a fear of the Lord. He was intentional about instilling these values into the lives of his children, and it set good things in motion. Now, the truth is that every family has its scoundrels, okay? Every family has people in it that did destructive things. My family is no different, okay? My grandfather's father was not a good guy, and he made a lot of really poor choices that set a lot of negative things in patterns. When it comes to, so be aware that all of us have a Max Duke somewhere in our past, in our family. But we have the opportunity to be the new Jonathan Edwards. We have the opportunity to set new patterns. When it comes to this, if you've been around church for a long time, we have different definition of discipleship. What is discipleship? And we've talked about this word sanctification a lot. Sanctification is the lifelong process of your behavior catching up to what you already are. You are pure and holy. Now your behavior just needs to catch up to that. You could say another definition of discipleship is breaking cycles in your own family. Breaking cycles in your own family is another definition of discipleship. Emotionally healthy spirituality is this course that some of us are working our way through. It defines discipleship this way. Discipleship requires putting off the old sinful patterns of our family of origin and relearning how to do life God's way in God's family. I love that. Discipleship, growing more like Jesus, requires putting off the old sinful patterns of our family, saying no to that legacy, saying no to the sinful patterns of our family of origin, and relearning how to do life God's way, but you're not doing it by yourself. You're doing it in God's family. So why did Max Duke and Jonathan Edwards' descendants follow two very different paths? I think it's because you could say, there's a lot of words that would contend for the best answer, but obviously I think maybe the best possible word is the word wisdom. One of them followed God's wisdom and one of them did not. Passages you've heard before, Psalm 110 and Proverbs 9:10 are almost the same thing, word for word. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Wisdom, the fear of the Lord, I should say, is the originating point. The fear of the Lord is not the goal. It's the necessary first steps. If we want to live wisely, we need to have a fear of the Lord. So we've been talking about having a fear of the Lord. In this context, that's not the goal. In this context, wisdom is the goal, but the fear of the Lord is where it starts. The fear of the Lord is a fountain of life, turning people from the snares of death. I want you to think of it as a fountain. Think of it as a flow. Think of it as a constant source. The fear of the Lord is not a canteen that you sip from. Proverbs 15:33. Wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor. What instructed Max's and Jonathan's kids, their grandkids and their great-grandkids? For Max Duke's family, it was probably just the desires of their flesh. Their wisdom was found in I want, I desire, I know best. Probably not a lot of humility. Humility was probably not a family trait in Max Duke's descendants. For Jonathan Edwards, the fear of the Lord was probably evidenced by their humility. I'm assuming it was easier for them to say things like, I need God and I depend on Him. So instruction and humility come together. Proverbs 3:13 and 15. Joyful is the person who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding. Wisdom is more precious than rubies. Nothing you desire can compare to her. I would guess to say, and hear me out, that Max's kids might have had more fun, but Jonathan's kids had more joy. In fact, you can either sometimes, of oversimplifying it, you can have jail or joy. If you pursue fun all the time, you might end up in jail. And it happened quite a bit to Max Duke's descendants. Or you could have joy. Max's kids had short-lived pleasure. They had more temporary fun. But Jonathan's kids had a longer-lasting satisfaction. Okay? Closing thoughts. Any unbeneficial fear in your life identifies what you haven't put under the cross. You still own that area of your life. The fear of the Lord leads us to surrender everything to Him. So that first point that we made, that the fear of the Lord is the fear that eliminates all other fears. The fear of the Lord leads us to surrender everything to him. When we do, we live in what others greatly desire but cannot find. That's peace, confidence, and freedom from fear. So the question is, what fear do you need to hand over and not own any longer? Okay? The fear of the Lord leads us to surrender everything to him. We need to surrender those fears, hand them over to him. They're no longer yours, they're his. Okay? The second point, when you live and walk in a holy fear of the Lord, something significant is transmitted to your family and your descendants. So here's a challenging question. Do you see any cycles in your family that need to be broken? Do you see any cycles in your own family that need to be broken? And the third question, as a Christ follower, getting wisdom is the most important thing you can do. The fear of the Lord is the fountain and foundation of wisdom. It protects us from the very alluring traps of destructive things. So here's a question. Have I drawn a line in the sand? Have I determined to not adhere to the wisdom of culture and society that is contrary to the Word of God? How will I seek Jesus' wisdom more carefully in my daily decisions and my behavior? So I think those are some good questions to ponder. Again, real quick, there is a lot of fear, and we need to hand those fears over. They're not ours any longer. The fear of the Lord is going to eliminate all your other fears. Okay, and we are leaving a legacy. Everyone is, and a fear of the Lord is going to be beneficial not just for us, but for those who follow us as well. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Take care, and God bless. Bye.